Welcome. We're glad you found this recorded presentation by the Knox County Master Gardeners. We are a volunteer community service group affiliated with the University of Tennessee, as well as Tennessee State University and their cooperative extension programs. The mission of the Knox County Master Gardener program is to educate and serve the community using research-based information on best practices in horticulture, environmental stewardship, and integrated pest management. One of the ways we educate is through our Speakers Bureau.
Jack Frost is on the way. How can I winterize my garden? Hi, I'm Joe Pardue, and that's what I'll be talking about today. I like this cartoon. It kind of helps differentiate between normal people and gardeners. At this time of year, when a normal person sees a leaf turning, they're just thinking, oh, fall's coming. But a gardener whose primary growing season is coming to an end is probably beginning to think about a lot of things they need to get done to help prepare for the next major gardening season, which will start in about 3 months in the spring. Now, I've got to admit, I can't count the number of times I've gone out into my garden in the spring, in March, and I've seen one bed where I've left diseased plants just fall and rot where they were growing last fall because, I was kind of tired of it. I've had other beds that I forgot to mulch, and so it'd be March and there are already weeds coming up. One year, I even found my mattock out in some weeds behind one of my beds, just sitting there rusting and the wood deteriorating in the winter. And I became very aware that I needed to think this through and come up with a list of things that I should do in the fall to make sure I didn't miss anything and that I got everything done, properly over the winter before spring. So let's see. I came up with a checklist, and this checklist isn't terribly well organized in that there really isn't any organizing principle here other than, what do I do to prepare for the winter? So I divided it into several sections, each of which are things that are fairly obvious that we need to do, but like I said, it's good to have a checklist because we might just forget about or overlook some things. I also, toward the end of this, I may have gotten a little bit overboard on the maintaining and restoration of garden tools, but it's information that will definitely prove useful. Garden tools can be quite expensive, and it's really just not a good thing to, like I did, leave my mattock out over the winter. But even the best of us will sometimes forget, leave our tools out. They get rained on. They start to deteriorate a little bit, maybe rust. So I've gone pretty extensively into what to do about that later in the talk. But let's see where we are to begin with. Okay, the first thing is to prepare the soil. Now that's by far the most important thing that you can do in the fall. Your soil is the greatest gardening asset that you've got. It's the largest and most important living system in your garden. And so you want to do everything you can to keep your soil healthy, because healthy soil is going to keep your plants healthy. So preparing the soil. One of the things we want to do is leave as much organic matter in the soil as we can. You remove all the dead and dying plants, of course. And if they're relatively healthy plants, you can go ahead and put them on your compost heap. But if you suspect there's any diseases in your plants, just definitely bag them up and send them out in the garbage. You don't want to keep them there because they'll just propagate the diseases for the next year. Let's see. One of the things I like to do is cut the plants off at their base and leave the roots in the soil. It might be easier just to pull the thing out, roots and all, but if you leave the roots in the soil, then you're not disturbing the soil, plus you're leaving organic material in there that'll provide nutrition for the next year. Let's see. Yeah, I've already said that. Now, the most important thing that you can do for keeping your soil healthy or getting your soil healthy is to get a soil test. You can get your soil test at, go on the internet. It's at, this is listed in the checklist, but I'm going to go ahead and spell it out here. It's Soil Lab, SOILLAB .Tennessee.edu. And what you'll do is, this will give you some instructions as to how to get your soil tested in Tennessee. I typically follow their directions of going around and getting soils from different parts of my garden. You get it at about a depth of 6 inches. That's where the roots are. And then you mix it together and you dry it. I put it in a baggie and then put it in a padded envelope and send it to the address that you'll find on that website to Nashville. And this, by the way, this preparation of soil and soil tests and things like that are covered in great detail in other Speakers Bureau's talks. So, keep an eye out for them. Okay, so we want to prepare the soil, and this is kind of an eye chart thing here, but you want to add a ½ inch to an inch of compost to the soil. And if you aren't making your own, like, I've got chickens, so I get chicken manure that I mix with straw and I make my own. But I also tend to supplement it by buying bags of compost from the big box store. I found that the best of them is Black Cow. And Black Cow, it's like the cow was spelled with a K. Actually, it's got some fertility information on the front. It's not highly fertile. It's not like fertilizer, but a lot of the other bags of compost you get in the big box stores may not be as good a quality. It's hard to know without good information on the bag. So, check that out and, get that. Another thing that you might want to do is you want to loosen your soil. You can use a garden fork about every 6 inches. You push it in the soil and you wiggle it around. Now what I do is I put the compost down first, ½ inch to 1 inch, and then I put the garden fork in, stick it in, and wiggle it around, like I said, about every 6 inches all the way across your garden. And of course that allows the compost to fall down into those holes. It loosens the soil, that allows the rain to get in and air to get in, and that also helps your soil to be healthier. So, at the end, I rake it all smooth so that it fills in the holes. Then I try to add 1 to 3 inches of mulch. I prefer leaves, that are collected in the neighborhood, and you can shred them, or it's probably better to use the mulching more and pre-shred them. But you can also just put them on the ground without shredding them. I mean, one of the things to think is, what does nature do? Nature drops the leaves on the ground, and nature doesn't shred them. Nature doesn't compost them. It just leaves them there. They cover the soil over the winter. They slowly break down and help provide nutrients. But one of the other really important things too, and one of the reasons that, maybe I don't shred them, the very top layer, is they help block the weeds. And it's important to do that, because you'll go weeks at a time in the winter without going out and looking at the garden. And if you don't keep ahead of the weeds, you're going to go out there one day and you're going to say, oh, it's warmed up and now I've got weeds everywhere. So I also use, I like to use straw and put the straw down. If you're going to use straw instead of leaves, you want to use maybe 4 to 6 inches of straw. And be sure to get straw and not hay. Hay is a completely different thing. It's animal feed. It's got all kinds of seeds in it, and it'll just turn your garden into a big weed patch if you use hay. So use straw. And I also work on the walkways between my garden beds. I typically, flatten out some of these millions of Amazon boxes that I've got coming in, and I'll put them in the walkways, and then I'll usually spread sawdust or wood chips on top of the boxes, and that helps suppress the weeds, and it'll break down slowly, and it'll also provide some nutrition. Even though I raise my plants in raised beds, the plants in the raised beds will often send their roots down, and they can absorb nutrition from the walkways also. And anyway, it makes it look prettier. So what do we do about our perennials, trees, and shrubs? The first thing, it's like with a regular garden, you remove the weeds, ornamentals, winterizing varieties of the plant, so that this is really dependent on whatever the variety is, and you need to do the background research on that. There's certain things you want to do for hydrangeas. There's certain things you want to do for hyacinths. I'm not the expert on that, and we don't really have enough time to go into all that. But research your ornamentals and find out what your individual plant needs are. Now, an important thing, and we'll see this again in a minute, is you don't fertilize. If you fertilize the plants this time of year, it will tend to promote growth, and then they start growing, and suddenly you get a hard freeze, and that's not a good thing. You want them to settle down and go dormant, so you don't fertilize. Again, like in your garden, you want to put leaves, shredded leaves or regular leaves, to use as mulch. I wouldn't recommend necessarily adding compost this time of year. I guess it really depends on the particular plant, but mostly the compost is going to provide nutrition in the soil that might cause it to think things are going well and not go dormant. Trees, we'll see this again in a few minutes, but you mulched the trees all the way out to the drip line, but never put mulch within 3 inches of the base of the trunk. I'll discuss that a little bit more later. Now, during winter dry spells, you're going to, like, every 3 or 4 weeks, especially if the soil's not frozen solid, you might want to water your trees. If we hadn't had much snow or much rain or whatever, the trees do suffer from drought in the wintertime. So, try to remember to do that. Your lawn, after your final mowing, sprinkle about 1/4 of an inch of compost on it. I don't recommend raking and dethatching and all that. Just my opinion. This just protects the soil, breaks down over the winter, and adds nutrition. But some people think that it also, I don't know, causes problems. So that is another thing you'll find a Speakers Bureau talks on lawns and turf grass. If you're really into those things, attend those talks. Okay, and let's see. So yeah, like she says, oh boy, I thought we were done with the yard work for the year. No, not really. Get rid of those weeds. So, and do not fertilize. And okay, yeah, mulch, lots of mulch. By the way, you can get mulch for free. Call the city, 311, ask them about it. There's some other resources. There are tree services that will dump a whole dump truck load of shredded trees for you to use for mulching. Like I said, I prefer the leaves. The city picks up yard waste and they take it to places like Shamrock or Nature's Way out at Solway, and where it's ground up and shredded and composted, or just mildly composted or left as mulch, and you can pick up scoops of it there. Just take a pickup truck and pay for a scoop, and that's perfectly fine stuff. Okay, now we're back on that mulching trees, and this is something you may have already heard about, but apparently very few of the actual tree services in the area have heard about it. You do this volcano mulching. You do not put mulch up against the base of a tree, because at the root crown, if you put mulch around that area of the tree, the roots will grow up and then they'll start circling around the trunk of the tree where they can eventually choke it. It's called girdling, and kill the tree. A lot of the trees over, if you go over the Westtown Mall parking lot, you can see some really egregious examples of bad mulching practices, with all the roots wrapping around, strangling those trees. Okay, let's see now. Okay, this is, I'm repeating myself here, sorry. During winter dry spells, water every 3 or 4 weeks on a day if the soil isn't frozen. Do this early in the morning if the freeze is due. And the lawn, yeah, okay, this is a repeat, sorry. All right, irrigation centers, irrigation systems. There's not a lot here. It's some of the things that are pretty obvious. You drain your hoses and you roll them up and you put them in the garage. And have you ever forgotten to do that? I have. So if you got a commercial system, you want to just make sure that you follow the manufacturer's recommendations, and take care of that, because those things can be expensive and you don't want your system to freeze because you forgot to do something. I also recommend covering outdoor faucets. There are products that are like foam pipe things that you can get at the big box stores that are made for that. You definitely want to do that, because if you have a really hard freeze, the faucet is actually sticking out there in the air, and there's water in it, and you can end up with a busted pipe like that. Okay, yeah, and here's I thought I put that I thought I put away the garden hose. Maybe not. That's why it's good to have a checklist. So you don't have to rely on your memory. Okay, now containers. We have a little bit on this too. You want to bring in your frost-sensitive plants and put them by a sunny window. Of course, if you got a lot of them, you better have a lot of windows. I find we have a bay tree, and it's for using bay leaves for cooking, and it's kind of big. It's about 5 feet tall, and it's fluffed out with a lot of leaves. And my wife picks bay leaves off and sends them to relatives out in California and whatever. But this thing is a large container, and I kind of lug it in, and I put it in the hallway where it overwinters with no particular light on it at all, and it does just fine. Put it back out in the winter if I know, like, okay, we're going to have 3 or 4 days where it's going to be in the 50s, not get below like 40 at night. I'll put it back out on the porch, but generally I leave it in the dark and then put it out in the springtime, and it's doing just fine. Some plants will not tolerate that much darkness. Others, like I said, the bay tree, don't have a problem with it. Just know your plants and take care of them. Now, if you are using like your containers for perennials or something, and you have gone ahead and you want to cut them out and take the soil out, and you can scrub it out using a 10% bleach solution, because these containers will tend to hold diseases and transfer them from one year to the next to other plants. So you dry and bring in unglazed containers. Unglazed containers will absorb the water, and you have a hard freak, and they'll freeze and they will shatter. And I'll show you a picture of that in just a moment. Here's an example. This is an unglazed strawberry pot, and it was left out in the winter, and the freezing caused slivers to spall off the side. Also, this is sitting on an expensive pot that's turned upside down, and unfortunately, even though this is a glazed pot and should have been able to have been left outside for the winter empty, it ended up cracking. It's got a long crack on one side, and these pots, they're surprisingly expensive. You see these a couple of $100s at some of the garden centers around. So you definitely want to take those in, and if you have perennials in them, take the soil out, scrub them, Leave them in your garage. Even though your garage freezes, you don't have the moisture problems of the rain falling on them and the like. If they're real expensive, maybe you might want to put them somewhere in your house where it doesn't freeze. Okay, now tools. This is where I'm going to go a little bit overboard on it because it's well, it's an important issue to me in that I'm kind of a cheapskate. I'll go and I look at like what does a new tool cost, and it's like, oh my goodness, they can be $50 to $100 for a lot of common garden tools, and yet I've got all these old tools laying around that were looking like they're about to fall apart. So I thought, well, maybe I can figure out some way to restore them. And I'm kind of a do-it-yourselfer, so you'll see there's a lot of stuff that I did myself that you may find interesting or not. Let's see. Oh, that shouldn't be there. That's an eye chart. Okay. This is that mattock I was talking about. I found it out and laid it on the ground elsewhere in the yard and took a picture of it to show how dried and damaged the wood looks, and of course it's still got mud and rust on it. Should not have done that, but this is an example of I guess you'd call this a fork hoe. Anyway, you can't really see it that well. These lines on here are not just wood grain. They're actual cracks that are coming into the handle. And after a couple of years, if you're leaving this out a lot, those cracks are going to widen and eventually the handle is going to break. You don't want that to happen. You also see this rust. It can take a really long time for a tool to actually rust through, but you might as well do what you can to stop the rust. And also you can make this tool look much more attractive when it's properly restored and maintained. Now there's a close-up of that handle. You see how one of the wood grain cracks has gone deep into that wood. If you leave that out in the winter, water will get in there. The water will freeze and it will expand that crack, and then it'll dry out, and it just, it'll eventually cause splitting. This is an old wheelbarrow handle I've got. It's just got funguses on it. It's even got a nice lichen growing on it. The wood itself is deteriorating and getting lighter and easier to break. And in fact, I had one handle like this that I was trying to move a load around, and the handle actually broke. That's not only sad from a financial situation, but it could also be dangerous. So here we go. So how am I going to restore this kind of wood? The first thing you want to do is you want to brush off the fungus, the lichens, the dirt, and all that using a wire brush. Yeah, excuse me. And once you get it good and brushed off, if you can blow away the dust, fine. If there's too much mud or dirt and remnants from the using the wire brush on it, you go ahead and just blast it really good with the hose, but then leave it for a couple of days to get good and dry again. Bring it inside, leave it so it'll get good and dry. And we're going to talk about what to do next. Let's see. Well, first, you saw that crack in the wood. Let's go ahead and get some wood filler, and I use, you want to do this before you're putting the linseed oil, the paste wax, or whatever else is on there. You want to use this to fill those cracks in the wood. I use this Elmer's brand, and I use a popsicle stick, and I just rub it into the wood, and then I kind of push it in with my fingers. And you want to make sure that the wood doesn't have a lot of splinters sticking out, because when you're pushing it in like that, you can definitely get a splinter. But you rub it in, and then you scrape off the excess, and then I would wipe it off with a damp paper towels until I'm back down to the wood. And let's see, after you let that get good and dry, This is when I use a popsicle stick to put on paste wax. If the tool is not very far gone and the wood feels sturdy and heavy, you can get by with just putting linseed oil on it. But I have made this homemade paste wax that is really excellent, and it not only puts linseed oil into the wood, the wax soaks into the wood and acts as a restorative, and also blocks it so that it doesn't have the water retention problems, and it stops the decay. And actually, once it's dry, it looks pretty good. We'll see that in a second. So here's homemade paste wax. Now I recommend using equal parts beeswax or paraffin, then gum spirits of turpentine, and boiled linseed oil. This beeswax, everybody would prefer that. It's very expensive, especially compared to the paraffin. I also, for one batch of this stuff, I just used old candle stubs. So you heat the mixture, wax is dissolved, and this is, I can't overemphasize this, you got to be very careful with this. You'll be making a potion that is extremely flammable, plus it's sticky, and you don't want the idea of stickiness and flames in the same sentence. So let's see how I do this. Get this at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, Ace. Boiled linseed oil, uh, uh, gum spirits of turpentine, old candle stubs or paraffin wax or beeswax, and then a cup to mix it all up in. Let's see, I've got a tongue depressor here for mixing it, and I got a screwdriver there, I guess, for opening the cans. Now, I do this outside. I've got a grill outside, and then I put a camp stove on top of the grill. I got an old pan rather, that was going to be thrown away, and I used that to mix that equal parts paraffin, linseed oil, and gum spirits of turpentine, and with a very low heat, I bring it up till it melts, and I can guarantee you, if you spill this and it catches on fire, you're not going to be able to put it out with anything less than a chemical fire extinguisher. If you throw water on it, it's just going to go everywhere. And so you don't want to do this in your house. And matter of fact, you probably don't even want to do it near your house. Very dangerous stuff. Okay, so yeah, here you go. Another important safety tip is in some tools that are, they don't need to be restored, they just need to be maintained, you're going to rub them down with linseed oil. That's fine. But the linseed oil rags, paper towels or rags or whatever, if you put them in a wastebasket and then sit them in your garage, there's a good chance that in the middle of the night they're going to burst into flames. They have spontaneous combustion. Very dangerous. Don't leave this stuff laying around. Either take it out in the yard and burn them, or bag them up and get them out immediately into the trash. And don't put them in your trash can in a bag that if it's going to be there for a couple of days, because they may catch on fire too. So just be really careful with this stuff. I then used a ladle, ladled out this mixture and put them in these small jars. It's an excellent way to store them, and if you make up a big batch of them, it's kind of a nice thing to give friends, because one of these small jars can do several tool handles, and people appreciate that. If you don't want to go through all the hassle, and maybe you're not as much of a do-it-yourselfer, you can buy this Howard's Feed and Wax. There are other products that are like this. I found this on Amazon. It's about $15 for 16 fluid ounces of it, which, and it's not, once you have gone through the process of making your own, this doesn't seem all that expensive. So anyway, you might want to get that. Now, yeah, okay, so now it's getting into the winter. and it's really too cold to be doing much gardening. So this is a good time to be just studying, learning for next year. So, if you got questions, and I think this will be mentioned at the end of the program, but you call the extension office at 865-215-2340. Either an extension agent or a master gardener will take a message. You put this on a recording, and they get the message, and they'll research it for you, and they'll get back with you with the answer. And this is a free service. It's why we're here. So definitely you want to take advantage of this. And if you like, how do I transplant a dogwood tree? And you really don't know how to do that. And you look on the internet, you find out you're getting 5 different pieces of advice, and each one of them says the other one will kill your tree. Well, go ahead and call this number. You'll get research, evidence-based information. Another thing is you can visit knoxcountymastergardening.org and click on the calendar button and keep track of the Speakers Bureau talks, because you'll get a lot of information from the Speakers Bureau talks. Hopefully they're all better than this one. Okay, one of the things you can do is learn about cover crops. So next year you can get them in the ground early. This is probably something you can, it's not probably, this is something you definitely do in the fall. It's not part of this talk, although it probably should be. You're putting in cover crops and green manure after you've, say you've torn out all your tomatoes. You don't leave the soil bare. You can definitely mulch it, but you can also put down green manure and cover crops that do better, even better than mulch, in improving the soil. There are Speakers Bureau talks that discuss this also. Now I'm going to show you, there's going to be some repetition here too. I'm going to show you some books in a couple of minutes. That one of the things I learned when I became a master gardener that I did not know before becoming a master gardener is that you can really garden year round. Now we're talking about winterizing your garden. It's like we're going to end it all up, and come November we're going to walk away, and we're not going to come back to March or April of next year. Well, you can do it that way, but you can also have food in your garden year round, all of those months. Even in February, you can have some food in your garden. Now, it won't be growing much. It'd be more like an outdoor refrigerator, but I didn't know you could do that, and I learned about it primarily from Elliot Coleman's books. I'll show you these books here in a minute. It's a good thing to do. Okay, and now I'm going to say just briefly here, when you do searching on the internet, you hear you're learning things, you're going to find something absolutely wonderful. It's about like, I had this question, and I look there, and I think, this is great, and then I see it's from northern Maine or southern Texas. Well, that ain't going to work for East Tennessee. So and also, even if the information seems like it is appropriate to East Tennessee, man alive, you get so much incorrect information on the internet. My favorite is everybody is pushing Epsom salts for tomatoes. It's like, no, just say no. If you're in Knox County, forget about it. But that's a rant. I won't get off on that. So when you do your search, add to your search terms the word extension, because that will be more likely to get you evidence-based information. Okay, and another thing is, order your seed catalogs. We'll see that in just a minute. Okay, here's an example of an extension, Tennessee Extension publication. It's document W 235-G, cover crops and green manure. Now, this is something, it's good to learn. It's a good way to get really good, healthy soil without, having to spend a lot of money on if you're buying mulch and compost and the like. Here's some of the books I recommended. Elliot Coleman. Elliot Coleman is in Maine, and I'm already thinking, why would I want to learn something from Maine? But actually, this guy has the best information or some of the best information available on organic gardening principles. And he's in Maine, and he grows vegetable crops year round. Now, admittedly, he does use greenhouses and hoop tunnels and the like, but he mostly doesn't heat them. And we can use hoop tunnels here in Tennessee. You know, I've harvested large heads of lettuce on New Year's Eve. And so there's things to learn there. In more recent books, The Year-Round Vegetable Garden, this lady is gardening in Newfoundland. But interestingly, the growth zones in Newfoundland are the same as where she is, are the same here in Knox County. They get a lot more snow than we do, but you can learn a lot about winter gardening from her book also. Next, there's, I mentioned this, the Knox County MasterGardener.org website. You can click on the calendar and you can see various talks that are scheduled. These talks are generally in public. Of course, this year you were all hiding from COVID, and that's why I'm doing this recorded talk. But hopefully by next year, we'll be doing this live again. And let's see, order the garden catalogs, bundle up and dream about what to do next. That's a great winter activity. Well, I hope that I provided some useful information here. At least make sure that you print out that checklist and you have it so you won't forget anything. And thank you for your time.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation and that you learned something that will help you in your gardening endeavors, whether that means more blooms on your flowers and ornamental shrubs, attracting more pollinators to your garden, or improving your vegetable production. As we were not able to field your questions today, we want to close by offering you some ways to reach us. As you can see on this slide, we have a presence on Facebook. You may post questions to either of these Facebook pages. Feel free to upload a photo, especially if it helps to describe the problem you have. If you are not a Facebook user, you may call the Extension office at 865-215-2340 and leave a detailed message with your question. Your question will be forwarded to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. You may also send an email to Ryland Thompson, the Knox County Extension agent who advises the local Master Gardener program. If a photo would help to describe the problem, feel free to attach one or two. Try to keep the total attachments to less than 5 megabytes. You may get a response directly from Ryland, or he may route your question to a Master Gardener to research and respond to you. We are eager to return to public presentations. In the meantime, you can watch any of our recorded presentations by going to our website, finding a Speakers Bureau event on the calendar, and clicking on the link that is included within the event details. Now, let's go get some dirt under our fingernails.